Hello and welcome to Gabbett Media. I'm Grant Abbott, and in this video I'm going to talk about probably the most important thing to achieving a good art piece that most of my students do really badly. And this is for both 2D and 3D art. I'll be using this spooky house image to illustrate the point, and I promise if you use this knowledge it will improve your work. If you like what I do, then check out the playlists in the description, and if you want more 2D content and tutorials, let me know in the comments below with your preferences. And keep a lookout for my Kickstarter project, which is on the way soon. So the most important thing that all my creative students do really badly is planning. And just as a side note, I'm going to be focusing on thumbnails in particular. I know it's that boring thing that gets in the way, but planning your projects through and doing a bit of research with maybe reference images and sketching out initial ideas is really important. It's really important for both 3D and 2D art. In 3D you can do it by blocking out, so putting basic cubes and other primitives in the correct position and seeing how they work together, and maybe putting in some lights as well. And in 2D it's even more important to do a thumbnail sketch to map out where things will go before you jump into that main image that we all desperately want to get to. I would say that almost every student I've taught in my teaching career has never used the planning stage to its full potential. And I would also say the vast majority of students go back to it once they've finished the final piece, only because they know they're being marked on it, so they feel like they have to do it. And they're basically tracing around their final image and trying to think of other thumbnails and things to do. And most students understandably have a particular problem when it comes to thumbnails and sketches. Most of them saying things like I can't sketch or I can't draw, which does make it difficult, but it doesn't take that much skill. Just a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. And that's another reason for me thinking about doing art-based courses, doing a lot of free content and a bit of paid content with a Kickstarter. But with a tiny bit of knowledge and some simple drawing skills, you can really improve your 3D art, 2D art of course, and any sort of creative piece that you do. Mainly because you can put so much more into that planning stage. I keep talking about thumbnails, so what are thumbnails? They are small initial idea sketches which should be done very quickly just to give you an idea of shape, outline, and what your finished piece might roughly look like. You keep them small so you can do lots and lots of them and build up ideas as you go. The reason they're so important is that one essential part of scene construction is the overall composition. So the overall placement of objects, the balance of the image, some terms you might have heard of, the rule of thirds, Hibbert spiral, golden ratio, and so on. But if you've ever tried doing these after you've done your final pieces and plonking things together so they work with those sort of composition guidelines, then you'll know what a struggle it can be after the fact. So do it early, do it in your thumbnails to get a good idea of how things are going to work together. Don't worry if you don't know about those sort of composition rules, but it's well worth looking up. And photography is a great place to get some ideas and where they talk about those sort of things a lot. So on the screen I'll come back to my thumbnail phase, and you can see here how the image develops really quickly in the space of about 20 minutes or so. The first thumbnail, there's very little detail in the shape and form of the house, is a touch basic and bland. Then I exaggerate those features by adding a bit of curve and bend, and then even further in the next one. Then I think about extra elements such as a signpost and a tree. I change my mind on the tree, and then the next one I put crows flying out from the building. I could have and should have created several more probably, but I was a little strapped for time. The final image is even a bit rushed as well, and I'm trying to have fun at the same time as producing YouTube videos. But once you have a basic of at least 3 thumbnails, you can swap around and put things from one element to another. You can simply copy and paste them and then delete a section, add a section, and pull different bits around. You can take it a stage further and add a bit of lighting. That gives you an idea of the real shape and how objects really sit together. I did this with 2 of my thumbnails, and I used this opportunity to stop and get some feedback, which is another crucial part of the planning process, which again most of my students pretend they do, but they don't. Once you've got one thumbnail that you've worked on you're really pleased with, you can actually take that thumbnail and just build upon it. So copy and paste it into a new scene and just start drawing over it and painting over it. If it's 3D, then you can insert that into the background and start tracing around it with buildings and shapes. Or if you've done the whole process in 3D with your blocking out, then you just start adding detail to your objects. And it really is just a case of the next stage adding a bit more detail, and then the stage after that adding a bit more detail, and so on. If you take a look at the first thumbnail and then the last thumbnail, you see the development, and in terms of the ideas, the progression, and the final piece would have taken me a lot longer if I'd not gone through these stages, and I don't think it would have looked as nice. And yes, there's probably a lot you could criticize with the final piece. It's far from finished. I'd really like to have spent more time polishing the final details and putting more into the final stages, but that's often what takes the most time, and I needed to move on to other projects. It's a nice, simple, fun project though that served its purpose for me to learn from, and I'm still working hard on developing my own skills. It's definitely the case that learning to draw or improving your 2D skills is both useful and rewarding and massively improves your 3D art. There'll be lots of people out there that will say otherwise and say that you don't need 2D skills if you're going to be a 3D artist, which is true, but what I'm saying is it helps a great deal, and if you really want to push yourself to the top level, then I would say that it's a must, in my humble opinion. And that's another reason for me wanting to do the art course. It's going to be a way of pulling those simple skills together, which will give people that can't draw just that bit of confidence to create their own concept art. Now there's going to be some people out there, and there'll be even a few that will be putting comments below, trying to convince themselves that it's not necessary, and they do the planning whilst working on the final piece, all that sort of thing. It's something I hear a lot from students. Maybe even have a look at the comments and see how many people have said that. We're all really excited to jump onto that final fun part of making the final design, and we can't help but just dive in. But actually the thumbnail stage and the planning as a whole is probably the most fun, as you get to quickly try out really cool different ideas and experiment loads. It's certainly the most creative bit. It's so important that the top level designers and creators put a huge amount of emphasis on it. And concept artists are for doing loads of thumbnails and passing them on for review, getting feedback before finally moving on to their final piece. Sometimes that final piece is still really rough and sketchy, especially if it's going to be passed on to another department like a 3D modeler or similar. So those sort of thumbnail skills and creative skills are really essential. So that's enough from me today. Avoid the planning phase at your peril. And if you're looking to really improve and get into the industry, then slowly build up the time you spend on the planning. And work a bit on your 2D art skills as well. Remember to comment below with your thoughts and check the links in the description for more great content. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.